There's a contradiction in I want to grow, but I'm not willing to change anything.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in CEO of Blue Dot Partners, best-selling author and growth expert, Philippe Bouissou, who understands what is required for an organization to grow to its fullest potential. And it just so happens that for we as people, the fundamental factors affecting business growth are all too similar to what we must implement to ready ourselves for growth as well. Hello there, GrowthReady listeners. I'm so excited to be bringing you this new, most recent installment of the show. And I am so excited to have a true growth expert joining us today. And I didn't ask you before we started, Philippe, how to pronounce your last name. So I'm just going to take a shot. We're welcoming in Philippe Bouissou. Is that good?
That's good. Yeah, it's Bouissou, but you were very close.
Bouissou. Yeah. Well, again, I grew up in England, grew up close enough, to that French influence, so I should be able to get that right. But anyway, Philippe, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody when we open up the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
Well, it only means one thing, which is really hard to do, which is to create and maintain a perfect alignment between the business and its target market. And if you do that, the business will grow as much as possible within that target market.
See, I knew the word alignment was going to come up frequently and often in this episode, and here we are, fresh out of the gates. Here we are with this word alignment. And one thing I like to do when, again, I've had the benefit of actually getting to know you before this through your book and through the information you provide us and my research, but here we are potentially using this word alignment a lot in our discussion today. And I think it's always so important to frame how you have been using this word and the way you've been using it in the work that you're doing before we maybe start using it too much for our listeners. So I'd love for you to maybe just kind of set the table, if you will, in terms of the importance of alignment and maybe why even this word and this entire concept has been so integral to you in how you've grown businesses over the years.
Yeah, so maybe, Steve, allow me to step back a little bit. First of all, we're talking about growth. I'm talking about top-line revenue growth, right? That's what we're focusing on. And I think it is the most challenging and vexing, difficult thing to do for any CEO, any entrepreneur, any business leader. And the question is extremely and deceptively simple, but really hard to answer. And the question is, well, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow my business? And I always compare that question to what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? And it's like, you don't even know where to start, right? I mean, you cannot, read books. You cannot get a certificate to be a good parent. And it's very similar in growing a business. It's very vexing. And I've been on 23 boards and I've always been seeing the same movie, which is, why are we not growing as much as we can? And the answer is, well, let's bring in the VP of sales or the sales guy. The sales guy comes and says, well, I don't have the right leads. They are crap. And then the marketing guy comes and says, well, we don't have the exact product or the features that we need that our competitors have. And then the product guy comes and says, well, I didn't have time or the budget to develop what I really wanted to do. And I've seen this circular finger pointing movie so many times, and I got so frustrated because it doesn't answer the question on why are we not growing. And about 10 years ago, I had this big transformational idea that I realized that the only way to grow your business is to ensure that it is as much as possible aligned with its target market. And you can think of it like a mechanical watch. If you misalign the gears, it doesn't mean the watch will stop working, but it will suddenly slow down, and at some point it's going to stop ticking. And if you misalign your business with your target market, you can still grow, but you're not realizing the growth potential. And at some point, you're going to become irrelevant and the business is going to die. So alignment is really the only way to grow as far as I know.
Yeah, and something that you alluding to there is this concept of potential as well. And, you're walking into a space potentially, let's say those 23 boards that you've served on and this endless amount of clients that you've worked with and companies that you've been exposed to. And I have to assume that while they may have all this finger pointing behavior that's going on, in the center of the room is this shared belief that there's a potential that we're just simply not getting to. And I'm curious, like when that part of it gets introduced, how quickly are you even discussing potential? Is it hard to like pull people back and just say, listen, maybe potential is not the thing we need to be focused on right now, and we need to be in the here and now and look at some of all the issues that we maybe need to attend to first?
Yeah, no, we dive into that pool very quickly. We zoom to that question very quickly, and it's actually quite easy to quantify. The question is, what's your growth rate of your business? So let's say it's 23%. Then the next question is, well, how fast is the market in which you operate? How fast is that market growing? Well, that market is growing at 33%. So obviously you're growing 10 points less than the market. You're losing market share. Somebody else is eating your lunch. You're not creating value. You're actually destroying value. So it's very easy to compare the growth rate of the business to the growth rate of the target market. And then if you're above, that's great. And if you're below, you have a problem and you're on the path to becoming irrelevant. Now, that raises the question of the definition of the target market, which is a sensitive topic. And it forces the company to really think very hard about how do I segment the entire market and what are the segments we want to go after and what are the growth specific to those segments as opposed to the entire market. So again, you compare your growth rate with your target market growth rate, and then you know whether you're losing or gaining market share.
Yeah, and something that you did too at the beginning as well, as you correlated it to parenting, and just that ability, like, hey, when we start the week, we want to believe that we've got the right plan, we want to believe that we're going to be doing the right things, but just like parenting, I know I can relate to this as recently as this morning in my household, when everything you think is supposed to happen should happen the way it's supposed to, but no one's listening, no one's doing as they were supposed to do. And just coming back now to that point you're making around business, I'm curious, like, how much of the work that you're doing in regards to the businesses and helping them grow and then analyzing these target markets, how much are you bringing it back to individual behavior and getting individuals to focus internally on themselves and how they show up in accordance with the work that you're obviously going to have them be doing?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. What happens is the first thing you need to do is you need to understand the alignment between the business and its target market. I call that the market-facing alignment. And in fact, there are 4 universal alignments, which maybe we'll talk about. Once you understand what those alignments look like, then you look internally and you look at the internal alignment. Do we have the right people to execute on this? Do we have the right tools? Are we communicating the right way? Do we have the right processes? What's the DNA of the company? So the sandbox, if you try to raise a child, they have their own character. So there's certain things that you have to adapt to that. And it's the same with companies. We call that a feasibility envelope. There is a space, if you will, a sandbox in which the company has the ability to execute the growth playbook. But if you push it outside, it simply can't. And it could be just because of DNA. We're working with a company that has been doing business for 100 years, literally. It's a family-owned business. We know that there are certain things that they're not going to do, even though they should. And that's fine. And we respect that. So the internal alignment is critical, but it can only come after understanding what you need to do to align your business with your market first.
Yeah. And this external approach that clearly you're encouraging a business owner and a set of executives, I have to assume they're having to look at things in a way that they've never looked at it before. And that comes right back to that human behavior component of just like, hey, if I don't want to see it, then I'm not going to see it. If I don't want to believe it, then I'm not going to believe it. And I'm curious, like when you're in those conversations, what does that sort of process look like for you to start helping people to see, like, hey, there's things that we're not currently looking at that we need to be looking at?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. We have a very particular way to look at the challenge of growth. And the way we do it is via data analysis and metrics. So I have a PhD in physics. I'm a physicist by training, and it's like I don't really care what people say. It's like, just show me the numbers. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is think of us like doctors where we happen to have our own X-ray machine and MRI machine and blood work machine. And what we do is we bring the CEO and the management team and we say, let me show you something. You see that's your X-ray of your arm. And you notice that little line on that bone, that's called a fracture, and that's what you have. Mm-hmm. And because you have that, you need to work out for 3 weeks, and then you need to do physical therapy. There is no argument that they have a fracture. They never argue with us. They're not going to say, oh, I don't see the line, because it's right in front of you.
Right.
They may argue with the willingness to do or not do the treatment, which is fine. But, once we show them the X-ray, there is no discussion. There's no disbelief. They know. They know we're right. It's the number. It's not us. It's the number that are talking. Mm-hmm. So we avoid this whole emotional discussion about, well, I think you should do this. Or why do you think that? Well, trust us. We're good guys. We've been around the blocks. I've been in Silicon Valley for 35 years. I've been on 23 boards. I know what I'm talking about. At Blue Dots, the firm I'm running, we never have that discussion. We say, let me show you that line. That's called a fracture. Mm-hmm. And that takes the whole emotional aspect out. Now, they may not want to step on the treadmill to lose weight. That's their prerogative, that's their decision, and that's perfectly fine with us. But they cannot argue with us that they have to step, an hour a day on the treadmill to lose weight.
Yeah, and so much of this show, we do focus a lot in the gray, like people's opinions, people's experiences, people's emotions. And I knew coming into this that you were going to help us kind of get out the gray a little bit and focus much more in the black and white.
Yeah, and then the other issue with emotion is that markets are changing and are very dynamic. They are changing all the time.
Yeah.
So, and it's like parenting. I think parenting is a really good analogy because the way you parent a 3-year-old girl who doesn't want to go to school is very different from the way you're parenting your teenage girl who doesn't want to school because she's bullying. Very, very different. And so, even though it seems to be the same problem, I don't want to go to school, the way you address it is completely different. So I think bringing objectivity and data really makes the conversation a lot easier. And then the only question that remains is like, well, you know what to do now. The question is, are you going to do it?
Yeah, and that's where we really get into the human behavior of protecting ourselves and avoiding what it is we maybe know is going to be the truth, but by knowing it, suddenly now we're armed with the duty to do something about it.
Well, I look a little bit differently. So I have been spending my entire business life to convince people to do things, right? Mm-hmm. It's been, when I was at Apple, I tried to convince, Gil Amelio was the CEO at the time and Michael Spindler before, that we should sell directly over the internet. And at the time it was like, no, we're never going to do that, until I met with Steve and Steve Jobs came back. And when I started Blue Dots 10 years ago with my partners, John, I said, John, I don't want to be in the business of convincing people to do things. That's what I've done all my life. I just don't want to do this anymore. So what we do is we're like doctors and we look at the patient and say, look, this is what you have. This is the prescription. And if I were in your shoes, I would certainly do it. But if you say, I don't really like to change, I don't want to implement, that's too much work, and you don't go to the pharmacy and buy the pills and take them, that is perfectly okay with us. We have no emotional reaction to that. Say, hey, this is your business. It's not mine. I'm not the CEO. You decide that you don't want to change. That's fine, but don't expect to grow. Mm. And then that brings a lot of integrity and objectivity to our relationship, where we have no vested interest whether they do it or not. We're just giving them the best possible advice that's based on solid scientific data analysis. So that's how we solve that problem.
Yeah, and I think if I'm a listener right now listening to you, there's probably this immediate feeling of just like, okay, there's probably some truths and some data out there that could immediately confirm something that I'm almost too scared to go find out. Like I know it will confirm something. And I'm just curious, from when you think about the absolute infancy of when you start to potentially engage with a company that you're working with, how are you maybe navigating some of that initial concern that they are about to be revealed some form of information that could actually be quite frightening and scary for them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We do that at the very first meeting. So we meet with the CEO and say, look, I'm assuming you want to grow. The answer is yes. I'm assuming you're humble enough to seek for outside advice. If the answer is no, then don't hire us, don't work with us. And that's perfectly fine. Now, if the answer is yes, then there's two things that I'm going to tell you. And he said at the very, very first meeting. One is we're like doctors. So if we find you have stage 3 cancer, we will tell you, and I guarantee you, you will not like it. Mm-hmm. So if you want to hire somebody to only listen to things you like, then you can hire McKinsey or Bain or BCG. There's many consulting firms that are doing a superb job at that. That is simply not who we are. We're doctors. And then the second thing is, are you willing to execute the change? We're going to recommend you change. You're not going to like it. You're going to look at it and say, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work. Are you willing to do that? They always said yes and yes to the two questions. Yes, I'm willing to hear the bad news if there is no there. And yes, I will do the change. And of course, when we deliver the growth playbook, they look at it and say, oh, I don't really like it. I knew we had a lot of churn, but I had no idea it was, 62.3%. Mm-hmm. And I always remind them, I said, remember the first time we met, we talked about this. We said, we may tell you things you don't like. And, you're going to have an action plan that you're probably not going to really want to execute. And so, we try to be as honest as possible, bring those questions up right from the get-go, from the very beginning. And some people are honest and say, you're right, I don't really want to know the market truth because it's going to hurt. And I said, that's perfectly fine. Some people have sickness and they decide to never consult a doctor because they don't want to hear the bad news. We're not here to judge. That's perfectly okay with us. But they cannot expect to be better and they cannot expect to grow. There's a contradiction in, I want to grow, but I'm not willing to change anything.
Yeah, it gets to the very heart of my business, but this show, most importantly, is like this show, GrowthReady, and it's the growth piece is so appealing and it's so exciting and it seems pretty on the outside, and then we really get into the ready, and we go, okay, well, the ready, as you're alluding to here, typically starts with a lot of truth and the good, the bad, the ugly that comes with growth, and the willingness to actually accept it, embrace it, and have these kind of discussions about it, and it's really interesting to hear that you kind of start with the ready. You're almost ready growth. It's just like you get in with the ready first. And it's just like, listen, I appreciate that you may be hiring us and you think you're hiring us to pursue growth. But what we're actually doing is that we're equipping you and educating you to begin with on what it's going to require for you to get ready to actually then pursue the growth.
Yeah. Another point you made, Steve, which you talked about truth. And we call that getting the market truth, which is we spend a lot of time interviewing customers, current customers, but also lost customers and current prospects and lost prospects. And of course, we talk to distribution partners if they have and channels. But we ask questions that we're very comfortable asking. So for example, we call a lost prospect and we say, Steve, last week you made the decision to not buy the product from that company. We know you made the right decision for your business. We're not questioning that. We're not trying to sell you or shame you, anything. We just have a simple question is, can you just share with us why did you decide not to buy? And I guarantee you companies are unable to have those conversations because they are so afraid to hear that their baby is ugly. And salespeople will enter into Salesforce or whatever CRM system they use. Well, they decided to buy because they didn't have a budget. It's like, well, wait a minute. You've been talking to them for 9 months and you're discovering after 9 months they don't have a budget to buy your product. And salespeople have no incentive and no willingness to hear why they didn't buy because they lost the deal anyway. They're not going to get their bonus. So getting to the real market truth, the art of asking the right question, double clicking at, yeah, but you said this earlier. I don't quite understand. Can you explain this to me? Playing naive, it gives us really great tools to really understand what is going on in the head of those prospects and customers at a level that nobody within the company would ever reach. And not because they are bad people, just because they are too afraid to hear what's going on. We're independent. We don't really care. And we invite people who said, did you think it was a bad product? And what was wrong with it?
Yeah.
So that's really important to do.
Yeah, understandably so. And it's fascinating to even just in my position as the little old executive coaching company that I am, not necessarily having to really consider too much of this high stake components around, market truth and market shares, etc. But to then actually, for me to step into my own truth right now as we're speaking and just say, do I truly understand from a market standpoint what it is people are longing for and truly needing when it comes to coaching? And if I were to step more into that as the executive coach I am, the likelihood of me slowly reducing the amount of time I'm wasting in how I'm selling to people, it already becomes so apparent to me as you're just really sharing this at a surface level.
Yeah, so velocity to disqualification in the sales process is so important. And in fact, we should reward salespeople who come back very quickly and said, this guy will never buy. Let's just move on to the next person. As opposed to dragging that prospect in the funnel. And every month we said, well, is BMW going to buy? Well, not this month because they have a new guy who just came in, but they are very interested. And then 6 months later, you still have the same discussion as opposed to say, you know what? I have the feeling they're never going to buy. In fact, I'm pushing them not to buy and they confirm they will never buy. They're done. And that's a very hard thing to do for salespeople, but it is so important. Just again, being honest and saying, those guys will never buy. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, we have prospects that don't buy. I always say, I just wish you the very best. And I don't feel bad. It's like, well, not a fit, there's no alignment. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, this is such powerful stuff, especially for any of our entrepreneurship and executive listeners. And there's one thing I want to do is kind of take it from this, conceptual discussion that we're having so far and get a little bit more into some of the true tools and practices. And you alluded to it before, the A4 precision alignment tool that you had that you go into in your book as well. I'd love for you just to kind of cover that for us here. I think it's something that could be really effective just to help people understand where this can be more practical and how they can get more practical around a lot of what we're discussing here.
Yeah, so this is an idea that came to me about 10 years ago, and it profoundly changed the way I look and examine any business. It was a very consequential idea. And the fundamental concept is, well, what does it mean that I need to be aligned with my target market? And what we found out is there are 4 universal axes of alignment between any business and its target market. And the stunning fact is that those 4 alignments are truly universal. So I can take a cafe on the left bank in Paris. I can take a startup here in Silicon Valley where I am. I can take a small company in Miami or Louisiana where you are. And I can take a Fortune 500 company headquartered in the heart of Manhattan. Those 4 alignments are exactly the same. And let me very quickly describe them to you.
Please.
So the first one is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes to address that pain have to be aligned. So if you come to me, Steve, and you say, I have a headache, and I show you a stomachache pill, you're like, well, wait a minute, I have a headache, not a stomachache pill. Your pain and my claim are not aligned. You will never buy the pill, and nor should you. Mm-hmm. The second axis of alignment is the perception versus the message. And the perception is how you as a prospect understand my claim. And the message is how I as a business express my claim to you. So I don't know if you speak French, but let's assume I tell you, Steve, voilà le médicament qu'il te faut et qui soulagera ton mal de tête en 10 minutes. And if you don't speak French, you're like, well, wait a minute, what the heck is this guy talking about?
Yep.
And what I said, I have the perfect product for your headache, and here it is. Mm-hmm. Now, you will not buy the product because you have no clue what I'm talking about. Mm. So aligning the way I express my claim, my message, and the way you understand, which is your perception, aligning those 2 things is critical. That's the second axis. Mm-hmm. The third one is the way customers want to buy and the way the product is sold in the marketplace have to be aligned. So if I say, Steve, I have your pill, just fly to San Francisco Bay Area and you'll get it. You're like, well, wait a minute, there's a pharmacy down the street from where I live. Why can't I just walk there and buy the pill? Mm-hmm. So frictionless transaction. This is the process by which the product or the service is acquired. And then the fourth axis is my favorite one. And I have to confess, I actually stole it out of the Apple playbook. So I spent some time at Apple. I worked directly for Steve Jobs. And by the way, yes, that's how I lost my hair in case you don't. But I learned a lot of really interesting lessons from Steve. And one of them really struck me and became the foundation of that fourth axis. Mm. And what I realized one day is that there is one and only one business on this planet. I realized that everybody is in the exact same business. So people say, well, there's millions of businesses. It's like, no, there is only one. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. That's the business you're in. That's the business we're in. That's the business American Airlines is in. That's the business McDonald's is in. We have to delight our customers. Now the question is by how much? And the answer is slightly above what they expect. So the fourth alignment is between the expected delight and what is actually delivered, the offering to that customer. Those 2 things must be aligned. So now imagine I have your pill for your headache, you take it, and after 20 minutes, your headache is persistent, you feel dizzy, you have a rash on your skin. Well, obviously, that's not the delight you expected. The delight you expected was, okay, I'm going to swallow the pill, and then 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, my headache will be gone, and then I will go on with my daily routine. So the 4 universal axes of alignments are that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes have to be aligned. The perception, which is the understanding of the claim, and the message, which is how that claim is articulated to the prospect, have to be aligned. The way you sell the product or your service in the marketplace and the way people want to acquire it have to be aligned. And then finally, what you deliver to that customer has to be aligned with the expected delight. And if you perfectly align your business along those four axes, you will realize the maximum potential growth rate within your target market.
It's such a powerful concept, and it goes without saying why it's been just so highly applauded when you read your book and when you see some of the comments that are out there around this concept. It's truly fast. It's truly incredible. And my favorite thing about it, quite honestly, is that while it is undoubtedly impacting so many businesses, I'm always looking for these creative ways that we can align it with the human in terms of the human behavior and the human performer.
Yeah.
And there's every single one of those axes. You just go, yeah, I can see how this is something that me as an individual, I can start showing up and almost holding myself accountable to.
Right.
In terms of how I align myself with whatever it is I'm passionate about. It doesn't necessarily have to be business. It can be simply being a better father to your kids.
Absolutely.
It all is so, the parallel is just really phenomenal and very clear to me.
Yeah, and it's very, in a way, it's a very simple concept. There's no, I've studied quantum mechanics, a lot more complicated than that. And at the same time, it took me like 25 years to figure this out.
Right.
Like, why? I mean, this is so obvious.
Yeah.
But, as I learned at Apple, simplicity is really, really, really hard. It feels simple, but there's a lot behind it. And then the next step for us, which is actually a lot more complicated, was how do you scientifically measure coefficients of alignment from 0 to 100% along each of those 4 plus 1 plus 5 axes, which is the internal alignment. And we've developed a collection of tools that we build as our IP, and we apply that. And that's how we get the X-ray equivalent, as I was talking a little bit earlier. Yeah. And that's how we can show the X-ray and say, your coefficient of alignment along the second axis is 62.5%, which means it's 38 points that you're missing. And what are you how are we going to rectify those misalignment to get that closer to 100%?
Yeah, I really appreciate knowing that that's where it goes. And I know our listeners will too. And it gives everybody all the more reason to go out and get a copy of Aligning the Dots, your book, because it really does go into much more detail in terms of those next steps. But to stay in the A4 precision alignment tool, just as I look at this concept of delight, I think it's something that it makes so much sense for us to be aspiring for as a business owner. Why wouldn't we want our customers to be delighted? Why wouldn't we want to create a product or a service that delights many and goes above and beyond expectations? But I want to bring it back now to what so much of the focus is about this show in terms of, let's say, someone like yourself, Philippe. I get it in abundance that you're someone who's doing something for a living that delights you, and you are delighted in the results that it has. What is it that fuels you to sort of pursue this delight? What is it about the process of achieving delightment that is truly powerful enough to get you doing what you're doing to such an extent and for so long as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great honor and pleasure to work with those CEOs and entrepreneurs and business leaders and see their eyes, opening and say, oh, now I get it. And now I know what to do. And because every company is like a child, for example, we're working with an egg farm. They produce 250 million eggs every year. We use the exact same methodology as another client, which is developing a complicated SaaS, AI-based, software platform. Yeah. But it's exactly the same thing to us. So the joy that we have is to give them an answer to what do I need to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow. And the answer is very different depending on the business. The playbook is very, very different. The same way, if you see a doctor, they will give all kinds of prescriptions depending on whether it's an appendicitis or whether it's a stage 3 lung cancer or COVID or anything else. And I think the pleasure and the intellectual stimulation that we have is to see those CEOs and those entrepreneurs and those business leaders thrive. And now they have an answer. A little bit like, if we help people parent better and they come and they say, oh my gosh, my child is doing so well. And we share that joy and we share that pleasure, and it's remarkable. And that's why, we've been doing this for 10 years, but I get excited about every single engagement. Yeah. And then the other thing I would say is we have everybody on my team, or about 25 people, have been CEOs of real businesses.
Wow.
And I think the level of understanding and empathy we have for anybody, and I don't care if you're selling ice cream on the corner of a street or if you're developing, the next NVIDIA chipset, we have a lot of empathy because we know how hard it is. And people say, well, it's like being on a roller coaster, and I used to correct them. I said, well, yeah, but you don't even see the trucks. You're in the dark. And actually now I say it differently. I said, yeah, it's like being on a roller coaster, but believe me, with a lot more angst and amusement.
Yeah.
And so that creates a very strong bond and very strong relationship with our CEOs and our management teams. And it's just, we're blessed to do that. It's just a lot of fun, and we're making a real impact on the company and on the business, and that's what makes us tick.
Yeah, and something I'm hearing as you speak through that, though, is a message to everybody is that as you pursue alignment, whether it be on an individual basis or on behalf of your business, like the importance of having people around you that not only are educated or people of experiences and prestige, but people that have been in your shoes, that are they've either been in your shoes, the ones that you're wearing right now, or they're in them right now with you. To have that kind of compassion, like you say, that empathy around you is clearly integral for anybody on their growth journey.
Yeah, and trust. I mean, trust is so important. I mean, they trust the advice we give because it's based on data. But they know we're not going to give them advice outside the feasibility envelope. They know they can do it. And we build amazing relationship with customers, our clients that we've been helping 10 years ago, and they're really good friends. And they still call us. Well, I'm going to interview a VP of sales. Would you guys, would you mind talking to them? Well, of course we talk to them. And I always think long term, because that CEO will be a CEO of 2 or 3 other companies, and I want to help them if I can. That's kind of the way we think. We're not transactional at all.
Yeah, and as we start to get to closing here, Philippe, I want to this concept of the visibility envelope. By the way, I just love the term. I think it's such a powerful term. I think it kind of really speaks to exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. But let's say you are somebody that decides to do a lot of this work that you're presenting here, and you work through so many of these stages. In your mind, like, what should we be aspiring to when it comes to this visual, this perspective, of this idea of what our ideal, or even using the word perfect version of the visibility envelope? Like, what should be a standard that we're maybe all trying to aspire to achieve when it comes to that?
Well, first of all, I think it's a clear definition of a goal and what success looks like. Because that definition changes radically depending on the business and depending on the context of the marketplace. So do we have a realistic goal that we can achieve? And do we all align on what that goal really is? And if you don't have that element, it's really hard to implement. And then what is the process? What is that growth playbook, which is really what we deliver? What is this operating plan that I can take as a management team, I can read, and I know what to do on Monday morning? And this is not about boiling the ocean. It's not about, blue ocean kind of strategy like McKinsey would do, which is great, by the way, but that's just not what we do. Yeah. And it's like, it's very, very specific. It's very implementable. And I think that's really what's important. Do we have a clear goal? Is it a realistic goal? And do we have a process and a path to reach that goal? And if the answer is yes to both of them, then you will grow and you'll be successful.
Yeah, and I think even just summarizing it, and there's that common theme of simplicity with so much of what you talk about. Yes, there's decades of work that's gone into it to sort of see it so clearly, but at the same time, to have now this result and these concepts that speak to simplicity, and that someone can just sort of sit here right now and say, you know what? So this is a great idea now that I can kind of have at the front of my mind, is like, what does a clear, realistic goal look like? And what does that clear process look like for me to have consistent growth? And that in itself can be this thing that I'm so much more comfortable all of a sudden putting out there and allowing other people to see, and like getting to that point of confidence where it's like, if I'm doing that work properly, why wouldn't I be confident enough to actually put it out there for people to see?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. So, Philippe, as we close here, I'm so thankful for the generosity of insight. So much of this, I think, it's applicable far beyond just simply within a business. I'm always looking for those creative ways that we can bridge these concepts within the business world to us as individuals and how we can carry ourselves. And I think you've given our listeners just a ton of food for thought when it comes to how they can do that better. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity where we can learn a little bit more about you as a business, but also just some of these obviously amazing things that you have out there in the world that we can access for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, so I think they can. You talked about the book, aligning the dots.
There it is. I got mine too. I brought mine just so I had it too. So,
So I think the book will give them a more detailed, kind of the next step from this conversation. I gave a TED Talk in 2023, March 2023. It's got 1 million views. That's a really good introduction, I think, of the concept of alignment. The best way to reach me is to connect with me on LinkedIn at Philippe Bouissou, or they can go to bluedotspartners.com and they can reach us out as well. I think that's probably the best way to get in touch and get a deeper sense on how we do those things and with case studies.
Wonderful, wonderful. And all that information, as always, will be in our show notes. And I'm going to create greater accountability for myself right now and admit to everybody listening that I have yet to send my copy of my book to you, as I promised a couple months ago. So I'm putting that accountability out into the universe so people can hold me accountable to getting that done. But Philippe, again, truly appreciate the time and the opportunity to learn from you. It truly is a blessing. And just best of luck with all the work you're doing at the moment and everything into the future.
Yeah, and Steve, again, many, many thanks for having me on your great show. I think you're really, helping a lot of businesses, opening their eyes to growth and what to do. And thank you so much for having me as a guest. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks. And my thanks again to Philippe for joining us on the show today. So much insight in what felt like such a short period of time, 35 minutes, and it was just jam-packed of information. If you are a business owner, if you are an executive and you just listened to that episode, firstly, I hope you had a pen and you were writing the whole time. Secondly, you might be better for going back and listen to it for a second time. I know I certainly will be listening to it beyond the post-edit work that we do, because there was simply so much. And Philippe somehow managed to hit so many of the main themes of his book across that 35-minute discussion. But something specific that I would love to just speak to is that word, the truth. We get into honesty a lot on this show. We get into listening to and accepting things that can truly move you forwards and help you on your path to whatever it is you're trying to achieve. But if you cannot get comfortable with the notion of accepting truth, then sadly, your growth journey is always going to be that little less than it potentially could be. And we alluded to talking and leading with potential at the opening part of the discussion, and understanding that as we spoke through all these different concepts, at the heart of it was this ability for us to simply accept and address the truth and then apply what the truth reveals. If you can do that, and you can do that consistently, growth will be consistent as well. So can you embrace the truth better moving forwards and start to get so comfortable with it that you just understand that it becomes a tool, it becomes an asset to you on your growth journey, whether it be on a personal level or be on a professional level? There is no doubt that truth can support human performance and allow you to achieve optimal performance on your growth journey. So again, my thanks to Philippe for taking the time to speak and meet with me today. And in addition, make sure that if this is something that was of impact and service to you, and I have no doubt that it was, be sharing it with people. Go ahead right now. Just go ahead, send it in a text message to a friend and say, hey, listen, we had this amazing conversation I got to listen to. I know it can be of impact to you. I would love for you to give it a listen. So make sure you're sharing the episode, leaving us a review as well. After this kind of episode, go ahead and click that 5th star in Apple if you're listening to us on that platform. I know it was worth it, and leave us some insights around why you thought it was so great. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the show so you're not missing out on any awesome content moving forwards. Best of luck to you on your growth journey, and I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.